The Browns are one of those teams for this year's draft. The first couple of rounds was very quiet for them, similar to teams like the San Francisco 49ers, Los Angeles Rams, and due to trades. And in this case, a trade for a quarterback, right? And if you're a fan of the skid marks, plug your nose and hope to God he brings you a championship because you don't like the thought of the guy being there maybe otherwise. Deshaun Watson trade, where you gave him a shit ton to bring him in and then gave him a 100% guaranteed contract over the course of the next 5 years. Well, now technically, I guess, 4 remaining years. To that point, the Browns are in one of those situations where you've already invested quite a bit of this year's draft pick capital into your roster. So you look at rounds 3 through 7, and you have to really hope that your scouts, your personnel executives, your general manager know what they're doing, because it's going to require connecting and really hitting on some guys in late day 2 and day 3 of the draft to build a team around Deshaun Watson. And you look at the Watson deal and you say, well, how does this look right now for the Browns? Admittedly, not good, right? I mean, you knew 2022 was going to be a lost season in the grand scheme of things because of the suspension, and he'd come back and play like the last 6 games. 2023 is going to be much more telling in terms of whether the Browns ultimately got this right or not. Time will tell. With that said, though, when I look at the body of work for the Cleveland Browns in terms of the actual draft picks they had and what they did during the draft weekend, they put in some pretty good work here. I really, really thought it was solid, in terms of rounds 3 through 6 in this case for the Browns, because they didn't have a 7th-round pick ultimately. But you look at day 2, and you look at their 2 third-rounders, and you start with Cedric Tillman. I had him as like a late 3rd, early to mid 4th-round type of talent, so taking him towards the higher end of round 3 is not a tremendous reach, especially when you look at the physical tools. The upside there is that of a 1st or 2nd-round wide receiver. That's what I see. Like, if you're talking about Tennessee wide receiver, certainly had Jalen Hyatt higher on my board than I did Cedric Tillman. But if I go back a year and I say, who would I have had higher on my board, Velus Jones Jr. or Cedric Tillman from that Tennessee receiving corps? Oh, it's absolutely Cedric Tillman. So, solid pick here for the Cleveland Browns. One of these 3rd-round wide receivers that you feel like has a chance to be productive at the NFL level. Siaki Ika is a beefy beast of a nose tackle, like Danny Shelton, much better kind of deal. I don't know if he's Vita Vea type of good, but he should absolutely be a day 1 contributor in the middle of that defensive line. So when I look at day 2 and I look at who they got, I don't think a lot of people had Ika going late in round 3. I saw quite a few people having him in middle to late round 2, top of round 3. So felt like a decent value to get him at the tail end of round 3. Cedric Tillman, again, one of those guys that you look at it and you say, hey, if things break the way you think they could break for this kid, he could outplay his draft position. They had a solid day 2, even though, again, they didn't have a 2nd-round pick, combined with not having the 1st-round pick, all because of the Deshaun Watson deal. For their day 2 grade, in terms of what the Browns did here, I gave them like a B- because, in the grand scheme of things, outside of thinking about Deshaun Watson as a person, but just in terms of the quarterback, if you think he's the answer, like, it's not so bad to give up a couple of 1st and 2nd-round picks to bring him in, although you should have just fucking drafted him in 2017 when you had the chance to do so not once, but twice. Just saying. But Tillman, Ika could be long-term contributors for this team. And then in day 3, I thought, again, really, really, really good effort here based off of the picks that they have. Dawand Jones has the upside to me to be a long-term answer at right tackle. He could also eat himself out of the league in 2 years and not give a crap. I saw some people talking during Saturday about, the showing up and refusing to weigh in at the combine, taking stuff off, questioning his love of football. I personally, when I would see people mock Dawand Jones in round 2, thought, that's a little rich for me. As I watched him at Ohio State, I wasn't as high as others on either of the Ohio State offensive tackles, frankly, but I definitely saw like a clear distinction in talent between Paris Johnson Jr. and Dawand Jones. So he's either going to be a starter in the league at right tackle, or he's going to be irrelevant in a couple of years because he can't keep the weight off. Time will tell. I love the pick for them of Isaiah McGuire at 126. That was a really good value pick. This was a deep class in terms of edge rushers. So as a minimum, you're bringing in a guy that should be able to contribute as a rotational edge rusher, in sub packages and obvious passing situations. Give you another guy that can get after the quarterback. And to get that type of value late in round 4 is pretty good. I love Dorian Thompson-Robinson as a prospect. Getting him here in round 5. To me, he was a third-round talent. DTR was QB 5 in this draft for me. What I really like about this pick for the Browns is you're talking about long-term backup potentially that you can have 4 years of team control at an incredibly reasonable contract. When you're paying all that big money to Deshaun Watson, you got to be able to find other places you can cut corners in terms of cost and cap commitment, and here's a way in place to do that. I also like the fact, just from a sheer fit standpoint, DTR can do some things from a skill set standpoint similar to Deshaun Watson. No, I'm not saying he is the next Deshaun Watson. No, I'm not saying he is as good as Deshaun Watson. But I like when teams have a backup quarterback, and I've come around on this, have a backup quarterback that is similar in skill sets to the starter. Because if that starter goes down or gets suspended, gets hurt, whatever the case might be, your backup can come in and you can run similar things on offense. You're not having to massively adjust your offense because the quarterback has changed. So really, really like that DTR pick for the Browns in round 5. To me, he was certainly the best of the quarterbacks available on day 3, and I personally would have taken him over Hendon Hooker. I think Cameron Mitchell has a chance to stick as a nickel dime back and special teamer. And then Luke Wypler, he felt like a decent value in round 6. At worst case, he's going to provide you some rotational depth on the interior line. He could be kind of a swing. I think he mostly has to play center, though, but he has a chance to be a future starter at center. And to be able to get him at that point in round 6, that's really good work there, letting the board kind of fall to you, if you will. I didn't have like a day 2 grade on him or anything like that. I'm not going there. I think others may have. I did not. Again, another Ohio State offensive lineman this year that I wasn't as high on maybe as the consensus or a lot of others. But at this point in time in round 6, yeah, worth the shot there for sure. So I really like their day 3 in terms of the combination of upside, value, fit. I like what they did. So I gave them a B+ for their day 3 approach. And when I look at this draft, again, like a big chunk of it's missing because the first and second round picks were invested in the Deshaun Watson trade. So it's hard to assess that fully from a true football standpoint. From round 3 and on, like I said, I do think they did a pretty good job here. Found guys with upside, starting potential. I could see coming out of this draft 3 to 4 future starters for this team. I think Tillman could be a starter as an outside wide receiver. I think Ika could certainly be their starting nose tackle. I look at Dawand Jones and say his upside is a starting right tackle in the NFL, and Isaiah McGuire certainly feels like a guy I'd expect to start maybe by 2024. So for the picks that they had, they did some pretty solid work. If Deshaun Watson we knew was going to be Deshaun Watson of, peak kind of Houston Texans, the draft grade here would probably be higher because then you say you absolutely give up the first or second round picks. You don't feel bad about it. But I give him like a C+ here. Certainly not a skid marks draft in the truest sense of the word. Thought they did some good work.